My daddy uses Anchor to publish his podcast, and he loves it. Not only can he record, edit, and distribute on this platform, but he can make money at the same time, all for free. If you too would like to get started on your own podcast, go to the website anchor.fm or download the free Anchor app. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Let's go!
You ain't gotta tell me so, 'cause I already know. Got my eye on the goal, too close, I know. You ain't gotta tell me so, 'cause I already know. I was summoned by God to be the greatest. They say my
Welcome to another episode of Third Eye Podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to creating open dialogue and conversation regarding any and all difficult topics. I am your host, Marcus Callahan, and thank you for joining me. I am so excited for you all to hear this week's episode. It has been in the making for almost 2 months now, but between scheduling conflicts, my guests and I just couldn't seem to get the timing right. Until now, that is. With that being said, let's introduce this week's guest. She is a writer and TikTok creator, but she is so much more than that, and I cannot wait for you all to hear our conversation. I came across her videos on TikTok late one night, and I was absolutely engrossed in the content she was creating. More specifically, her viewpoint on who Jesus Christ was and her views on conservatism. Without further ado, I introduce to you the host of the podcast, Anne's Archism, Miss Annie Buell. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So happy to finally get this going.
I know it's been such a back and forth trying to get this a thing.
Yeah, it has. But we're here and we're doing it. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So, first of all, because of the state that the world is in right now, I have to ask you, how are you handling things with COVID?
Surprisingly, well, I'm not going out. I don't go out at all. I mean, the only times I go out obviously is for like essentials, groceries, gas. When I do go out, like socializing, obviously like I wear a mask and it's like only with my 2 roommates, so like my household. But I mean, mentally, like, it's weird, like collectively this has been like such a shit show for the whole world. But personally, I feel like 2020 has been a really good year for me. And I don't think that growth or the opportunities that have come my way would have happened had COVID not been a thing. I mean, they would have happened eventually, I think, but I think COVID was really, I mean, maybe I'm speaking for a lot of people too, but for me, COVID was really, it was kind of opened a lot of doors for me personally and mentally, and also career-wise as well. So I'm just trying to stick it out and wear my mask and be safe, but so far, handling it well.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's interesting that you mentioned that COVID has opened doors, because I've heard that from a few people who tell me, because everything's shutting down and whatnot, they really, an awakening has happened, and they're realizing that they can't really rely on corporate America to get them through. So, they've started their own businesses, focus more on their careers, myself included. So it has been a blessing in disguise, sort of.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, I was let go of my office job that I only had for like 10 months. I started it back in September of last year, and because of COVID, I was let go. And it was really shocking. I mean, obviously I'm like without a job in the middle of the pandemic, what am I going to do? But looking back, I think it was definitely a silver lining, because it kind of pushed me to really work on my writing. I have a writing degree and I haven't really used it all that much. So it really pushed me into the path that I think I'm supposed to go down.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Speaking of COVID, it seems that we might have a president who will actually take
Hmm.
it seriously, assuming the results are correct, which I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah.
Um, have you been following the election news at all?
I for as much as I like talk about politics and theory and everything on my TikTok, I actually watching the news and watching any election news stresses me out. Like I can't sit there in real time and watch it. I have to like wait until a few hours goes by and then like kind of filter through social media, like certain people that I follow on Twitter, who I know like will like follow the news and they kind of put it out there and translate it for common lay people like me who don't really understand journalist language. Um, but I, yeah, so I haven't, I wasn't following like live updates. One of my roommates was like constantly like updating us like in the group chat at my apartment. She was like, oh, like Biden took Georgia, like Biden took this state, Biden took this state. All he needs is these many votes until he's considered the winner. Um, so I didn't follow it as much as I probably should have, but again, it's so stressful. Like this year, 2020 with everything going on was so stressful and our current president like and I know this is like saying this is like underrated. Our current president stresses me the fuck out. Like every day there's just something that he does I can't handle. I don't want to read it. I don't want that like negative energy. Like I don't even want that in my brain. So I follow what I can. If there's like obviously a big breaking story, I will go and like read up on it and see what, I don't just go to like the mainstream. I don't watch mainstream news at all. Um, but yeah, so I don't, I don't follow it live 24/7. I mostly just follow like the big news and how hopefully my roommate continues to keep us updated as everything goes with the election.
Okay, okay, I hear you. I too, I don't really follow it live. My wife does, so she keeps me updated. But yeah, this president, he
Yeah.
stresses me the fuck out too. Like to this day, I don't understand how nobody has shut down his Twitter account. Like, take his phone away, do something.
Someone do something.
I don't understand it. But yeah, I live on the East Coast. I live in Delaware. And I was driving all through Pennsylvania these past 2 days, and in like almost every yard, I was seeing Biden slash Harris signs or Black Lives Matter signs. So it's really not hard to believe that Biden took Pennsylvania without, any widespread fraud going on. So
Yeah. Yeah, I surprisingly living in California, there are a lot of I mean even where I live currently like in San Diego in my part of the town North County San Diego, um there are a lot of Trump supporters in California and I feel like a lot of people don't understand that when people talk about like the West Coast, the left coast, whatever, that's pretty much just what it is. It's the Bay Area, it's Oakland, it's Silicon Valley, it's LA, and then everything else east of that is pretty much just like more West Texas. Like if you go more inland to like more farm, like the Inland Empire, in Riverside, like just more east inland, there's Trump supporters everywhere. Like a couple weeks ago, I went bike riding just up the coast and a big like Trump parade, like I'm sure you've seen them on social media, like with their big trucks and their flags and everything, just came barreling through on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, ruining everyone's day. And everyone else around us is like, can you believe this? But they're everywhere. They're everywhere. But luckily, I mean, because we have so many people living on the coast, California is still a blue state. But yeah, California is not as liberal as most people think. It's if you go outside of anywhere on those coastal cities, it's moderate at best.
right, right. A lot of places are actually like that. And this year has kind of outed a lot of
Yeah,
people, so it's been crazy.
yeah, absolutely. It's it's brought out like some really ugly sides to people. And like even people in my own life that I didn't even think would even support a candidate like that, support a president like that. I'm like, oh wow, okay, so I guess I need to reevaluate like who I talk to and who I keep in my circle, like really close friends, you know. It's just brought up really ugly rhetoric and really ugly sentiments, and it's sad, it's shocking, because these are people that you think you've known for a long time. You think you see eye to eye on things, and then it's just like it's like the cognitive dissonance. Like, how can you support any person in any position like that? Like, forget the fact that he's president. Just as a human being, the kind of person he is, how can you like him?
Right, right. Yeah, it's crazy. I've come across a lot of people in my life who I was very surprised to see them supporting Trump. And, they all gave me the same reason. It's because they think he's better for the economy. They're not racist or whatever, which is fine. Not everyone who supports Trump is racist. But if you are prioritizing the economy over human lives, at the very least, you're selfish. And I just can't get with you.
Yeah, I that's so funny. I literally just said that, like that exact same sentence, something like that yesterday. I was watching I was binge watching The Crown on Netflix, and there was a scene where they were talking about, in I think this was in the 1960s or 70s, like right like when in England during the time when like their GDP was really low, like they had to devalue the pound, like their economy was just really bad, unemployment was really high. And there was someone in the prime minister's cabinet that said something about, the economy and da, 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 this is going to really hurt the economy, or we need to do this for the economy. And I remember like just yesterday I remember saying at the TV, I was like, why would you prioritize the economy? It's not a living thing. You're going to prioritize something that we made up over actual living human lives. Like, the economy is not a real thing. It's not a living entity. It doesn't need shelter. It doesn't need food or water. Like, oh, it was so frustrating. And then my roommate just laughed. She knows when I get like ramped up like that and I start going, she finds it funny. So she just went, "Oh, there goes Annie." And I had to stop myself. I said, "I'm sorry. We'll keep watching the show." But yeah, like people who prioritize it's profits over people, like it's people are here and now. Like, the economy is something that we can change and get rid of, but like human lives are much more important than something that we created.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. So I actually came across your TikTok months ago,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I was so engrossed with your content. I was like, oh my gosh, she gets it. She is so on point. When I first reached out to you,
Right.
you had about roughly 70,000 followers, and now you have close to 100,000 followers.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's not like, so I downloaded TikTok in March of this year, or like even before then, to because I was bored. It was quarantine. Like, we were all in lockdown. We were all staying at home. Like, I needed something to like, and I was, being at the time I was 27, but like being a millennial, I was like, I don't know if I fit on TikTok, but I'll just download it and see like what fun stuff I come across. And then I think in May, the first video that I made that went like viral was when I did a lip dub to a scene from the newsroom. That went viral. And then the more I kept posting about like political stuff. Oh, and then, obviously the George Floyd murder happened, and Black Lives Matter protests, everything's like broke out, and I started posting more videos. I think the second viral video that I made was me talking about, like started out with me like as like a white Karen girl. Was like, why are you scared of the police? Like, they're here to protect us. That one went viral. And so the more I realized, like, oh, people like when I talk about politics and Black Lives Matter and religion, like people like that stuff. Okay, so I don't have to do just like the dances or like whatever, which I still do sometimes. But yeah, it wasn't anything like, I didn't join TikTok with the intent of being like, I'm going to gain 100,000 followers by the end of the year. I just joined it because I was bored. And then I just posted how I felt. Like, I just was calling it out and calling it for what it was. And people seem to really like it and not really like it. So Um, yeah, it's crazy, but I definitely feel like being on TikTok and gaining these many having these followers, like I said before, that has opened up a lot more opportunities. Like obviously now I have my own podcast and I have people like yourself, other people reaching out to me and saying, let's collaborate, let's do something. And it's it's opened a lot of doors. So I'm very thankful for all the followers that I have that like my stuff, that and I've learned so much too. Like there's so many people, all my mutuals that I follow, like there's so many people that I've met and I that I would have never had the opportunity or the chance to do any of this had it not been for TikTok, and had I not just had the nerve to just post what I posted. So yeah, it's I still find it, I'm still like shocked when I wake up in the morning. And like this morning I woke up and I was like 250 new followers and 268 comments, and I was like, I don't have time for this. I'm just going to put the phone down and go rollerblade. And like, so I try not to get sucked into it too much because I like to be here present in reality, working on my writing, working on my podcast. But yeah, it was a huge surprise to me.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think the one thing that drew me to your account was I could tell how genuine you are. And I think it comes across in your videos. And whether people like it or not, they can't deny that you are genuine in what you say and believe. So I want to thank you for being that, because there are a lot of people on TikTok who front, who are just here for clout. But you seem to really want to be there to help people.
I do, yeah, and it's yeah, that's one thing that's kind of cool about, you know, kind of linking back like COVID and all of this, is even though like all of us are more isolated and we're away from each other now and we're not seeing each other face to face, it feels great to have that sort of connection and to know like that I am helping some people out there, and I am challenging some people. And I can't tell you how many messages I get like from people every day just being like, your videos help me so much. Like I was raised in like a conservative household or like a really religious household, and I've been struggling like with my faith and my doubt or with my family now that I'm out of that or I've changed my views. And I empathize with that 100%. It's a really lonely place to be when you realize like, oh my gosh, everything that I grew up with believing and the values that I had, I no longer value. You feel so alone. So it's really great to still have that like sense of connection with people, and to know that like, you know, we're in this together and we're working through it together and we're figuring it out together and we're unlearning together. So yeah, it's just it's it's been such a really, this year like has just been such a catalyst. Like everything's just exponentially exploded. And I'm just grateful for every day. Like every day I wake up and I'm like, all right, like what's today on TikTok going to be like? What am I going to write about today? It's awesome.
That is awesome. That's really awesome. Um, so for those who do not know, those that will be listening to this, what is your background? How did you get into talking about what you talk about?
That is a great question. So I one, I'm sure you can tell, and I'm sure that people who know or listening that know or follow me on TikTok can tell, I'm a very passionate person. I Yeah, I feel things very and urgently, very deeply and intensely, and I feel very strongly about a lot of things, mostly about just the well-being of humanity as us as a collective. So I grew up in a very conservative Christian household, an evangelical Christian household. And it's looking at, because I feel like every day I always like reflect and like gain some new insight into who I was as a child and like growing up and everything and how I was shaped and molded. But growing up, I mean, when you're a kid and you grow and you're automatically like immersed in that kind of like religious environment, you just accept that easily as truth. Like you don't question it. And they drill it into you, not like in a mean way or in a scary way. It was never, I was never like, every Sunday when I went to church, it wasn't like fire and brimstone. It was, people were very nice and caring and loving. And I know that a lot of the people that I went to church with and my family like meant well, but the message they were conveying to children is wild to me. Like, as a child, like, you're telling a 5-year-old, if you don't believe in the divinity of this person who lived thousands of years ago and accept that as truth, then you're going to go the rest of your life feeling lost. You're going to go the rest of your life wondering why you're not fulfilled. And that's just not any way to like to mold a child's brain, because the brain plasticity is like so young. It's so vulnerable. Our brains haven't fully developed, so you don't learn to critically think for yourself. But I remember as a child having these questions in my mind. Like, I remember being 7 years old and knowing on a Sunday morning, I don't want to go to church. Like, I don't want to wake up and go to Sunday school. But I knew if I said that to my parents, that just wasn't an option. It wasn't allowed. If I threw a temper tantrum or like just said like I don't want to go, I would have gotten spanked. I would have been grounded. Like, I would have been reprimanded. It just like wasn't an option. Like, not going to church wasn't an option growing up. So as I got older, and like closer to end of high school and went to college, when I went to college, I went to college as an 18-year-old with the mindset. I went to a private religious university. I went to Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego, and I chose that school thinking that that was the best choice for me, for my spirit, for my faith. And I was going to come out like such a stronger Christian at the very end. All valid feelings, all like, whatever. But when that was just not the case. Like, I entered just like wide eyed, like, I think I know everything. Like, I know my path. I know what major, like, I know what I'm going to graduate in. And that just did not happen. Like, college completely flipped my entire belief system, who I am as a person, upside down. And it was my sophomore year of college when an ex-boyfriend of mine from high school, I found out had passed away. He died unexpectedly of a drug overdose. And that was kind of the first like awakening, I guess, was his death. Because I remember being angry. I remember being angry at God. I remember being angry at other Christians and the church because they just didn't seem genuine in their empathy and their sympathy, expressing their sympathy for me. But more, it was a much more internal thing. Internally, I just felt like, why would God do this to me? Like, why would God take away someone who did not deserve to die that young? He meant a lot to a lot of people. He was very important in my life, like very important in my life. And so I remember I just fell into like a really, really bad depression, really, really bad, to the point where it was suicidal. And I did try to take my life on New Year's Eve, 2012. And that was just kind of like, that was my first rock bottom. And even still, like, going through all of that and like after my attempt and everything and working through that in college, like, there were just so many things that I remember learning about in college, because at a Christian university, like, obviously you have to take classes like about the New Testament and the Old Testament. Like, you have to take biblical religious classes. And the more I remember learning about the Bible and the more about how it was put together and the authors of the Bible and all the books that were left out of the Bible, the more it dawned on me, like, okay, this is all completely constructed. Like, this is not, when I was a child growing up in Sunday school, they just make it seem like this is the natural way of things. Like, everyone eventually will accept Christ and everyone is going to be a Christian. And I remember learning that when I remember being in college, going through the aftermath of my ex-boyfriend's death, working through the aftermath, the mental stress of a suicide attempt, and then learning about how the Bible was constructed, learning about just other worldly religions that Christianity influenced, and that Christianity also borrowed from. That was just kind of what, when I graduated college, I didn't call myself a Christian. When I graduated college in 2015, I considered myself an agnostic. I didn't know if God existed. And even since then, since 2015, So that was kind of like a deconstruction of my faith. And then 2015 on with the 2016 election, that was kind of like my second awakening. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of when like my eyes were really opened to not just like how dangerous of a role American like Christianity has played in America, but how that religion has influenced so many policies and so like it's constructed how we pretty much run our whole society on Judeo-Christian beliefs. And it's just so dangerous. And learning about the more nuanced American history, that was what I guess kind of like pushed me, like radicalized me, I guess. Um, so it was just I'm very and when I was in college and learning about all these like other like religions and religions that Christianity borrowed from, I became interested in learning about different denominations of Christianity. So that's when I started learning about like Unitarian Universalism, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can totally vibe with this. Like this is so open to a lot of other faiths. It allows for much more nuance. It's not as black and white, and I felt like when because I did go to like a Unitarian church once, and when I walked in, I didn't have that like feeling of fear that I had grown up with when I walked into like my evangelical church. You know what I mean? I walked in and I just felt like I was just at a meeting, like just getting some coffee with some friends. Like we just sat in a circle and we just talked for an hour. And it wasn't even like a sermon, it was just a dialogue, like a conversation between the minister and the congregation. There were like 15 of us. Um, but yeah, I've always had an interest also in just like astrology and like paranormal stuff and like supernatural stuff and like witchcraft and paganism. I've always been interested in that from a little when I was a little kid. But growing up in that environment that I did, I felt so restricted. I felt like I couldn't ask any questions. I felt like I couldn't go to my mom and just be like, what do you think about ghosts? Because I knew the answer that she would give me was an answer that was, like, oh, well, the Bible says this. It was an answer that she had been taught to respond. Um, so that's my background. I just completely did like a 180. I'm so glad I did. Um, I think back to like 17, 18-year-old Annie, and if she were to see me, like what her reaction would be. And honestly, I think she'd be a little relieved to know that I didn't continue down this very fundamental path.
Well, it is a very interesting background you have there. I will say.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a Baptist church, and going to church never really sat well with me. It never felt right.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, I enjoyed the parts where we would sing and dance and praise. I enjoyed that a lot. But when it came to the sermons, I couldn't really vibe with the scriptures and how the pastors were interpreting them. So,
Mm. Yeah, that's the thing about. Oh, go ahead.
as I got older, I started questioning things more. And when I got into 10th grade, my sociology teacher, Mr. Vlaming, I'll never forget it. He said to me, Marcus, question everything, even if you believe in it. Question everything, because how can you know you truly believe in something if you never really research it or question and challenge it? So from that point on, that's what I did. I questioned everything to the point where, like you, I no longer called myself a Christian. I became agnostic, and to this day, I still don't really know if I believe that God exists. But I'm always open to learn more.
Yeah, and that's one thing too, is because I do get asked sometimes. People ask me, so like, what do you believe in? Because I am interested in like paganism. I do read about paganism and like the Druids, Celtic Druids and everything. So I'm really interested in the more like mystical part of spirituality, like more mysticism, the more it's where it's more internal, and you're going inward. But as far as like God, like the Christian God, like that idea of God, I completely reject. I do believe that there is something that connects everything, like connects all of us to the earth together. But that is something that I just can't even begin to describe what it would be named, what it would be called. You know what I mean? It's like it's too great for me to ever find out or understand what it is. Um, and that's I think that's just right there. That is the mystery. That's like the mystery that I want to chase after is what is this thing that connects all of us and makes and connects us all as one human race. But as far as like the religiosity, like the idea of the God, Christian God in the Bible, I completely reject that.
I completely understand why. The Old Testament God always scared me a little bit, just because he was always portrayed as a vengeful, all-knowing being, all-powerful. You need to worship me or else type of being. I just couldn't get with that because I too believe that
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely something out there. I believe that there has to be a reason for all of this. Everything, the universe, the way it is. I just don't think it's some jealous God.
And I think too, one thing that I've learned that I have to constantly remind myself is that is of the context and like just the time that these people were living in when these scriptures were written. These were people living in that like thousands of years ago. I think what, like the Iron Age? Like, so these are people, humans living in a time that is so far back, and they're just trying to make sense of the world around them. Um, there's no way that they would be able to comprehend what we know as a 21st century human. Um, and also knowing that most likely the God that they talk about in the Old Testament is a different God that is described in the New Testament. And um, that's one I made couple of TikTok videos talking about that, and it definitely upset a lot of some Christians when I posted it. But that's one thing that I have to remind myself is that the God of the Old Testament, when at the time it was written, is a different version or different God that's discussed in the New Testament. I believe the God of the Old Testament is El, or like Elohim, or yeah, I think it's just El. Um, and the God in the New Testament is Yahweh, I believe. I could be getting those two names mixed, like El could be in the New Testament and Yahweh could be in the Old. But that is one thing that I have to remind myself is that one, they most likely worshipped different gods. Like they most likely had like a head god, like a main god that oversaw a bunch of other gods, and then these bunch of other gods, like I remember reading that like El was the god of Israel, but Yahweh was the god that like oversaw El and like all these other gods during that time. So I have to remind myself of that. And also they are also humans just literally trying to make sense of the world. And if they can do that through like storytelling and, you know, talking about, like if a storm comes, like, in the Old Testament, they talk about how there was so much destruction, the flood was sent because God was so angry at the world. It could just be a really big natural disaster that happened and they just didn't know what it was. They didn't understand that natural disasters like this happen. um yeah, and I think as long as humans have been alive, we've always tried to make sense of events that we can't explain. Like if a solar eclipse happens thousands of years ago, humans would have been like, oh my gosh, we must have angered a god. But now we know, no, solar eclipses happen all the time. It's when the moon passes through and blocks out the sun, blah blah blah, whatever. But that's what I have to tell myself is they were just trying to make sense of their own world, of their own reality. um and not to say that there aren't like some things that we can take from those stories and like lessons to be learned, I guess, but to me it just reads more as a telling of a group of people who were just trying to make sense of their life in the Middle East, and make sense of their faith and try and figure it out.
That's what's up. So you mentioned that you have your own podcast. Uh, do you want to go ahead and plug that really quick?
Sure. So my podcast is called Anne's Archism. You can find it on, I think, pretty much all the major media where podcasts are: Google Play, Spotify. I think it's actually also on Apple iTunes, but don't quote me on that.
It is.
But yeah, so that's my podcast. I think I only have like 6 or 7 episodes up. I took a break for a little bit because in August or October I was working. I had a job and then they let me go. It was a really brief stint, but because I was working, I didn't have enough time to like devote to my podcast. But now that I'm unemployed and trying to make my own career as a writer, I am back working on it now. So, but yeah, that's the name, and Archism, and you can find it on pretty much any media where podcasts are streamed.
That is what's up. I am on episode 3, I believe.
Oh yeah.
I really like your stuff. The first episode, you were talking about conservatism, and I found it very, very compelling. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, what is conservatism?
So conservatism is an ideology, is a belief that that pretty much adheres to structure, it adheres to hierarchy. It's an ideology that wants to preserve the way things have been. Tradition. A lot of people who are conservatives value family. They value like the nuclear family. They value religion. They value the idea of individual responsibility and autonomy, but also maintaining the hierarchy that we humans are in.
Okay. I highly recommend you guys go check out her podcast, go check out her TikTok. She has amazing content. You will not be disappointed. Another thing that really drew me to you was the way that you spoke about Jesus. And normally when people speak about Jesus, he's this holy religious figure, an all righteous person. But you speak about him as he was, which is a man who was a radical activist.
Human.
You know, he fought for the little people and he went against the status quo for that time. So yeah, I'm absolutely engulfed in the way you speak about him because I've never heard anyone else speak about Jesus in that manner.
Really? Yeah. I mean, I really admire the teachings of Jesus. And that's the thing, is you don't have to be a follower. You don't have to believe in the divinity of Jesus to recognize that what he taught and what he preached was very radical for not only the time that he was in, but it's radical now when you look at how what the church has become and how legalistic it's become, and how ordered and structured and hierarchical it is. It just seems so counterintuitive to the meat, like the actual grit of what Jesus was teaching. Um, he, I think he was a man who saw right through the system that, you know, for the people that he in his community that he grew up in his nation, his region. I think he saw how unfair it was, how unjust it was. He saw right through the hypocrisy of the political and religious leaders, and he worked very hard to make sure that everyone understood that loving your neighbor is the most important thing, and the most important commandment to him. I mean, obviously loving God and love your neighbor, but loving your neighbor, Jesus was so adamant on making material change here on earth to better the lives of those who are suffering. And I think one of the most important parts of his teachings is his rejection and his distaste for wealth, and his rejection of hoarding and amassing material things on this earth. Because for what? Like what? For why? For what? Why do you need to gather that much wealth? And I think that's one thing that I think a lot of especially when we talk about, like, in Christianity, when we talk about today, modern Christianity, the prosperity gospel. That's one thing I think that really rubs a lot of Christians the wrong way. The idea of um, truly giving what you have, what you don't need, to those who do. Um, so it's very, and I think where we went wrong with that in Christianity is is in the Protestant work ethic. The Protestant work ethic was a real it was a nice little thing for capitalists to pick up on, because they could tie, if the capitalists knew if they could get the religious people, the people who don't really critically think and are so easy to jump to faith and to just go off what they feel, if they can get those people to believe in working hard so that you may one day have the chance of being a millionaire, having a lot of money for their profits, for their gain, then that's it. That's all you need. And so I think that whole idea of the Protestant work ethic and working really hard and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and taking individual responsibility for your mistakes, I think that's become so warped and twisted to now where we now a lot of Christians just have such a lack of sympathy and empathy and awareness of the suffering of so many people, not only in this country but across the world. A lot of Christians are just so quick to turn a blind eye to it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about how their religion is is has been so detrimental to the well-being of millions of people, and has caused the deaths of millions of people. Um, so I think Jesus's message of loving one another, giving what you have, uh, and doing what you can to bring the kingdom of God, heaven, to earth, so that no one has to go hungry, no one has to starve, no one will be, like what he says in the Bible when he talks about heaven, not a tear will be shed, whatever. I think that's what he was trying to bring here, and that's what he was really aiming for. And unfortunately, when you have an idea like that is so revolutionary, it's going to be put down by those who have more power, who have the power to put it down. um but I think, but like I said, you don't have to believe that he was the son of God. You don't have to believe in his divinity, or 100% man, 100% God. You can just see him as he was as a man, and who he was as a man was extremely revolutionary and very radical for that time. And those are teachings that I think that we should apply today. Like, why not care? Why not love your neighbor? Why do you have to work 40 hours a week at a job that you don't like, just so that you can pay your bills, that you can make sure you have food on the table? I don't think that's the way that Jesus would have wanted us to live our lives. I think he would have, if he came back and he saw the state of how a lot of us are living in this world, he'd be very sad.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. It's crazy because you say, his ideology was radical back then, but even now it would still be considered radical, which is just crazy because it should not be a radical idea to take care of one another and help each other,
Yeah. And I think it's so funny that, he healed people, and he did it without asking for a $20, $30 copay. Like, he just did it because it was the right thing to do. And I think it's so I think it's so funny. I mean, I guess the cognitive dissonance isn't funny, it's scary, but Christians always talk about how when we're in heaven, everyone will be the same, everyone will be equal, no one will be sad, there won't be any pain, there won't be any sickness, there won't be any starvation, there won't be any of that. And then they talk about Jesus, who came to earth, according to the theology, to bring the kingdom of God, heaven, to earth. So why wouldn't then, as Christians, why wouldn't you also work to make sure that we bring that heaven, that utopia, to earth? Why do we have to suffer now for maybe the hope that we won't have any suffering in the afterlife? Like, that's not who Jesus was. Jesus was all about making change now, like going against the system, standing up to the leaders and saying this isn't right. We need to love one another. We need to get rid of these laws, these structures, these legalistic codes we have. Love is the most important thing in making sure everyone's taken care of. He wasn't someone who was I don't think he would be someone who would say, oh well, if you're suffering now, it's just keep suffering, because when you die it'll be better. Like that's just not any way to go through life. So I think I find it funny, the cognitive dissonance, when Christians say that they work hard so that, and they try to be a good, morally upstanding person so that they can go to heaven, but you're only focused on that's the thing, you're only focused on yourself. And that's not what Jesus' focus was about. His focus was not on him, he was about the people. So I think that's where a lot of Christians, they don't understand that that cognitive dissonance kicks in. So yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can listen to you talk about this all day long. One thing that I did notice, and you brought this up earlier, you did make quite a bit of TikToks about the George Floyd murder and Black Lives Matter. Thank you, first and foremost, for being an ally. I really appreciate it, and I know so many others do as well. In these trying times, it's hard as a black man to discuss these things and not get some type of vitriol rebuttal from people. How do you, as a white woman, go about changing the narrative when it comes to discussing things like race in America?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing that I tell people, because and that's the thing, is as a white ally, I never want to speak over anyone in the Black community, because I'm not Black. I have never experienced racism. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. So the biggest thing that I tell people when talking about race is, I think I made a TikTok like this, is I tell them, just because you haven't experienced it personally doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Additionally, just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean that you can't still care about it and care about that it's happening to other people. And I tell them it's very important to listen. It's really important to listen. And because I remember, like, when Black Lives Matter, when the movement first started, back in 2013, 2014, 20, yeah, something around then.
Yeah, 2013-ish.
And I remember the counter response, All Lives Matter, came out. And I remember when I saw that, I was like, oh, like, okay, well, like, I get it. Yeah, of course, like, all lives matter. Like, I thought they were just kind of like being like more inclusive, like Black Lives Matter. And I was like, no, all lives matter. And that includes Black lives. But the more I saw all lives matter being used as a pushback for people's like hidden racism, that was when I was like, okay, like we need to unpack a lot of things here. So that's what I tell people. I just say, I can't talk about how bad racism is for the Black community because I haven't experienced it. So for me to talk about race and to talk about just race in America, racial injustice, I do still feel like I need to not censor myself, but not speak over or speak too much. And then also my biggest thing is just being an ally and elevating those voices. And when I see, my other, Black creators on TikTok or other people that I follow that are part of the Black Lives Movement, that aren't white, and they're giving their own experiences, their own accounts, their own feedback, their own perspective, I elevate that. I sit down, I be quiet, and I say, okay, yeah, like this is your time. Like these are the voices that we need to be listening to, because it's it's not enough for me as a white woman to be an ally and be like, racism is bad, like we need to change things in America. But all I can do is present them with a true history. That's what I tried to do when I tried to talk about like the history of the police in this country. And I was very surprised that a lot of people didn't know the history of police units in this country.
Right.
And a lot of people, I think, that have those that aren't, there aren't like aggressively racist, but they have those like internalized racism. I think when they hear that, it's easier, and this is psychologically true, it's easier to reject an idea as or it's easier to accept an idea as true than to reject an idea as false. So it's easier to believe than not believe. So if you go your whole life believing that there's no racial injustice, it's all an equal playing field for everyone, and then someone comes up to you and says, hey, actually, it's much more nuanced than that. Here's a real more accurate detailing history of race in America. I think they get scared, that cognitive dissonance kicks in. So it's just, they just reject it. So I'm still trying to figure out how to balance that as an ally and as a white woman, not speaking over people, making sure that the things that I do say don't come off as performative, and that I'm elevating Black voices and elevating people when they speak out, making sure that people hear them, because they're the ones that we need to listen to. Obviously, as a white person, as a white woman, I know that me being white, I carry a lot of privilege. So, and I mean, I see this all the time. Like I've seen, who was it? I made a TikTok video, and someone reached out to me, and after I posted, and they messaged me and they said, I literally said like the exact same thing like that you did in your video on my profile. And she got so much more like negative feedback from other white people that were commenting on her video, versus when I posted a video with the same content, I got a bunch of other, like white people in my comments. Yeah, like that's right. Like yeah, Black Lives Matter. Da da da. I'm like, okay, so why is it when I say the same thing that a Black person's saying, more valid than coming from me because they've lived it? Why are you taking their feedback, their perspective, their lived experiences with a grain of salt? You know what I mean? So I'm still trying to figure out how to balance that. But right now, all I can do is just inform people, be gentle with people, and understand that their reaction is most likely the product of internalized and unchecked racism. And we can hopefully go from there.
Well, all right. Once again, I do appreciate you being an ally. It means a lot. One of the main reasons why I started this podcast is so I could get people to open up and have the difficult conversations regarding race, politics, religion, etc., and get to a place where we can have disagreements without being offended. I think as a society, we should have been there already. And we need to get there because we can learn so much from each other. Even if we disagree, and I'm not saying we have to agree on everything.
Yeah.
My wife and I are very, very different. But we come together and we actually talk and communicate, and we're able to find common ground. I think that we all have way more in common with each other than we realize. So that is my goal with this podcast, is to help people realize that. So I want to thank you for being a part of this. I really do appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad that I was able to talk with you after it's like, what, I don't know, almost 8 weeks of us going back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you said about disagreeing, like coming to, being able to have conversations without getting offended. I am now, even though I've been, been posting on TikTok, for months, I'm now getting to a point personally for me to where when I say something that offends someone else that they don't agree with, and they come back with a, like really like bad faith response. Like I get a lot of people that comment on like my hair, my makeup, and say I just tell them like I'm not going to talk with you because you're already acting in bad faith. Like we can't have a conversation if you're just going to sneer and like make little teasy jokes about my appearance. Those people I kind of just like I don't worry about because I can tell that they're not ready to have that conversation yet. But the people that respond with, actual, a counter argument, even if they do it like harshly or like in a really rude way, I'm getting to a point now where I'm learning not to be offended, like not to get like automatically like jump at their response. Um, and I've learned that, I mean, this just happened last night. I posted a video yesterday uh talking about being like leftists being brainwashed. Or no, she commented on a video that I posted talking about communism, and it was a no nuance November video, and I said, if your response to communism is to say it'll never work, communism is when the government does stuff, without actually reading any theory or analysis of what communism is, then you've been brainwashed. And so I posted that video, someone else responded to it, and she, in her response, like she posted her own video, she was very like, I could tell she was very like worked up, like she was irritated, she did not like what I had to say. So I just went into her comments and I corrected her. I said, first of all, like, I'm an adult, so please speak to me like one. Don't call me girl, don't call me honey, don't call me child. And I said, second of all, like, communism is not nearly responsible for the millions of deaths and suffering of people on this planet, like as far as capitalism goes. Trying to have that conversation, and she was just like swearing at me. She was, insulting me, and I just finally had to say, okay, I don't even know what you're talking about now. I said, you still seem pretty worked up. Let me know when you'd like to talk without you acting in bad faith. And I went back this morning and looked at her video. She deleted all the comments. Like she deleted all my comments, all her comments. So I'm just learning that people are at different points in their growth and in their political journey. I guess they're evaluating their political values. So I've learned now, it's kind of like, if I were to put like a visual to it, it's kind of now like when I get responses like that, it's automatic, like the shield goes up, like, and it just bounces back to them. Because before I would take that and like internalize it, and it's like I would take it really personally, like, oh, they're mad at me. It's like, no, they're just mad because they're angry because they heard something that they didn't like, that, and they have this Pavlovian response to it, to like get angry when they hear a certain word or anything like that. So I know that it's not me, it's what I'm saying that's the concepts that I'm talking about that are triggering them.
Right. It's funny you say that because I have a background in security, and a lot of the times I have to tell people things that they don't want to hear, and people get very irate when I tell them the things that they don't want to hear. So I have a lot of training in knowing when someone is mad at me versus the situation and what's being told to them, and them not understanding why it's being told to them. So yeah, I totally get that. Um, so yeah, I'm pretty good at also, and I have to credit therapy, couples therapy to be exact, for being able to practice this skill. When you hear something that you don't like, instead of automatically getting defensive, and I used to do this a lot with my wife, I would argue and she would say something that I didn't like, and I would immediately get defensive, and all of my reasoning would go right out the window. It used to get crazy. But since we've gone to therapy, I've learned that when I hear something, to actually listen and try and dissect what it is that they're trying to tell me. And even if I am offended by what they're saying, instead of lashing out, being able to communicate and say, hey, what you said offended me. I don't like it. Could you explain to me what it is you meant? Help me understand further. And that's really the reason why I do what I do.
Yeah. I mean, I do what I do because like the information, the stuff that I talk about, the stuff that I share, the opinions I have, the history that I present, the facts that I try to present. This is all information that I wished I would have. Sorry, I have a lamp here. I'm just gonna turn that off. Sorry about that. So that's all information that I wish I would have learned about growing up, and not just from my parents, but learning in our schools. And that's another thing, is the education system in America is so biased. Like, it's
Yes, it
so,
is.
there is
Yes, it
such an
is.
agenda. Like, we don't learn about, like, when you learn about the colonies, how America was created, they talk about, like, it was just this fun little agreement, and the Indians just, like, or Native Americans just, like, gave over our, like, land, like their land to the, like, no, that's not how it happened. I just learned a fact yesterday. It was like, when English colonists came to America, they wiped out 90% of the indigenous population, and that was so catastrophic, it changed the temperature, like, it affected the temperature of our planet.
Wow.
And I just think that's not something that we learn about in school. So the things that I talk about, the things that I share, the beliefs, the perspectives that I share, I do it in hopes that people who still have the mindset and still have the beliefs that I grew up with, they can question them. They can have their minds opened a little more, especially if they're already kind of like questioning or doubting. I want to be able to give that information so that they can take it and they can do their own education and they can come to their own conclusions. I want to be able to help people to critically think for themselves, even if they come to a value, or a viewpoint that I don't agree with. At least they did it by themselves, through honest reading, through understanding more nuance in our history, in our politics, etc.
That's what's up. I think that there's a real value in that. And I wish you all the best. Like I said, I am engrossed in your content. I love it. I know others do as well. So keep doing you. You are so amazing.
Thank you. Well, I'm really glad that you asked me to be on your podcast. I've been on 2 others, but it was like earlier in the summer. And I'm actually trying to, like, get other people, like, asking other people, like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? We can talk about this. And so maybe one day I'll have you on my podcast as well, a couple episodes. But yeah, I really appreciate you, like, have me come on, and we can just have this conversation.
Absolutely. It's funny. When I first messaged you, I was like, I don't think she follows me, so I don't know if she'll get this or not. And then you responded. But yeah, absolutely. I am so happy that you agreed to come on, and I would love to be a guest on your podcast if / whenever you'll have me.
Yes, yeah. I'll message you on TikTok. I'll reach out to you.
Absolutely. Well, Annie, it has been a pleasure talking to you, but I have to wrap this thing up.
Sure. Obviously, I understand.
All right, I will talk to you later. Thank you so much for being on Third Eye Podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
All right. I want to thank Miss Annie Buell once again for coming on as a guest for Third Eye Podcast. I had an absolutely amazing time speaking with her. Thank you all who are listening. Thank you to everyone who continues to support me in this endeavor of mine. If you would like to be a financial supporter, please click on the link in the description. You can make a monthly donation. It all helps me to be able to produce better content. And if you guys have any suggestions on what you want me to talk about, please reach out to me. You can hit me up on my website or through Twitter or Instagram. My handle is at @thirdeye_podcast. Please, hit me up, guys. Once again, December 1st from noon to 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, I will be doing a live showing of my podcast for Indie Pods United. You can get tickets at indiepodsunited.com. It is going to be amazing. So many talented people will be speaking, performing. It's going to be a blast. Now that that is said, I want you all to please be kind to one another, love each other, and have a wonderful night. Take care.